I go once a week. I used to go every day, but people told me it wasn't healthy. People understand grief for about 6 months or maybe a year, but after that they just expect you to move on. The only benefit is people start to avoid talking to you at social events. They don't want you to kill their buzz. Honestly, the kind of people who avoid you are the kind of people who would bore you to tears anyway, talking about house prices or a new Kia they just bought. Sarah was never one to suffer people like that. Fools and dull conversations got shut down quickly. Maybe it was the slave in her, but I always admired her for it. I'd get stuck talking to some boring asshole for hours. I buried her here in Dublin. She didn't really have any family back in Poland to send her to, so I bought a plot in Mount Jerome Cemetery. It's a sea of graves just outside the center of Dublin, in a place called Harold's Cross. It got its name on account of it being the old hanging grounds for the city. It was steadily raining, but I had a decent coat. So I wasn't bothered. I talked to her about my week and told her a dirty joke someone at work had told me. She always liked jokes. So whenever I heard a new one, I told it to her. Then I told her I missed her every day. I didn't break down crying, which is progress, I suppose. It was dark. It was time for me to go. The gates were probably already locked. The caretaker took pity on me and let me stay a little later than everyone else. I could just climb the trellis near the exit to get out. I walked toward the exit. The rain began to intensify. It quickly became a torrent. I could barely see a few feet in front of my eyes. I took shelter under a massive oak tree. Sheltered there, I looked out at the wall of rain. The tree canopy was thick and big enough to cover about a 10-meter radius. A few gravestones were also lucky enough to be sheltered under it. They looked old. The graveyard went back a long time, so they might have been there for a few hundred years. I bent down to look at one. It was covered in a thick moss, but the inscription was legible. Mary McCarthy. Always kept a tidy home. Beloved mother, daughter, sister, aunt and child murderer. Born 21 September 1970. Died 14th March 2026. What the hell? Who put shit like that on a headstone, and why was the date in the future? I was a little spooked, but decided to read the other two. Seamus Doyle. Served his community and country faithfully for 21 years. Beloved father, son, brother, uncle, and violent rapist. Born 8 February 1982. Died 24th December 2025. The last headstone read, Billy O'Connell. He saw something he shouldn't have. Beloved son and brother. Born 18 July 2014. Died 31st October 2024. I didn't recognize the woman or the boy's names, but Seamus Doyle is a politician, crooked as a country lane, always accused of taking brown envelopes, but he never got anything pinned on him that stuck. Every election, his inbred constituents re-elected him because he fixed a few roads and showed up at every hurling game. Who the hell would make a gravestone for him? Sadly, he's alive and well. I saw him on a current affairs show the other night bitching about how gay marriage was destroying the Christian fabric of Ireland. Was the headstone some kind of publicity stunt? Claiming he's a rapist was gonna end someone up in court for libel. Lovely weather we're having, a voice spoke a few feet away. I nearly jumped with fright. I was so engrossed in looking at the headstones. Jesus Christ, you scared the shit out of me. I spat at the kindly-looking old man who was sheltering under the canopy with me. I am truly sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. You must not have heard me with the sound of the rain. He had a warm face and seemed genuinely apologetic about startling me. His voice was soft and warm. I took a moment to compose myself. The man was old, maybe 70, and wearing a large overcoat. The chain of a pocket watch hung outside his front coat pocket. He was fairly dapper for an old man. Sorry, I didn't mean to snap at you. I was just a little freaked out with these headstones. Have you seen these? They're pretty unusual. I pointed to the headstones. He didn't pay much attention. Your wife, how did she die? I hope you don't mind me asking, it's just, sometimes I see you up at her grave while I am here visiting." His voice was warm, and he seemed genuinely interested. When people nose into my business, I normally tell them to piss off, but he seemed kind and a little sad, like he had lost someone recently. "Car accident about 2 years ago," I told him as we sheltered under the thick, warm canopy of the oak tree. "Her own fault or someone else's?" he inquired. "Someone else's. She was coming home from work late at night. She was taken off the road by another car," I informed him. "I'm sorry for your loss." He consoled me with great empathy. He seemed to genuinely mean it. I had been distracted by his questions, but I was refocused again. "Have you read these gravestones that don't make any sense?" I asked him. I thought he might know why someone had put them there. "Most people don't pay much attention to those. In fact, most people don't seem to notice them at all," he informed me. "The other driver, did they die in the accident?" he inquired. I was confused by all his questions. Why did he seem so unconcerned by the gravestones? "No, it was a hit and run. The other car left the scene. They never found me. These dates on the gravestones, they're in the future. Have you actually looked at them?" My words were all flowing together, telling him about Sarah and asking about the graves. "That's a terrible tragedy. God isn't always fair, I suppose," he said almost absent-mindedly. "Look, it's been nice talking to you, but I have to go." With that, I took out my phone and took a few pictures of the graves. I wasn't going to get any information out of the old man. I thought he must have been a touch senile. Maybe the groundskeeper would know. I could call him the next morning. I pulled up the collar on my coat and walked out from under the shelter of the oak tree into the rain. As I did, the man's voice spoke again. "You're not going to interfere, are you?" he asked sternly. I walked back under the tree canopy. "What?" I asked him in a confused tone. "Those names. You're not to interfere. They're marked. They all belong here." His voice was no longer warm and kind, his face no longer friendly. "What? A 10-year-old kid deserves to be in a grave?" I spat at him. "He belongs here. You don't need to know why, but you are not to interfere. Do you understand? Those names belong here." He was aggressive now, venom in his voice as he spoke. I squared up to him, pointing at him with my finger. "Look, you old codger. I don't know what weird shit you're doing in this graveyard, but my wife is buried here. So if I see you hanging around here again, I'm gonna knock out any real teeth you have left in your senile head." With that, I walked away into the rain. Again he called after me. "Another grave could be added, with another name," he said. He clearly didn't know when to shut the fuck up. I pounded back toward him with my fists clenched. "Simon Castles," he finished. I stopped dead in my tracks, my body frozen with fear. He stared at me with cold, dead eyes. "That's the name you gave him, right? Simon Castles? You didn't have a real name for who killed your wife, so you gave him a name. It made him seem more real. Like in the noir films where a cop never finds his father's killer? Or a man who can't remember who attacked his wife?" I had never told anyone the name Simon Castles. It was just a name I gave him in my head, something to focus all my hatred and bile on. In truth, I didn't even know if Castles was a man or a woman. It could have been anyone. A fourth grave could be added for Simon Castles. Most people can't see the graves, and I'm sorry that you did, but I need you to forget about the names and the graves, and I swear to you, Simon Castles won't see the new year. It's what Sarah would have wanted." He was clear and concise, his tone menacing. It was a promise and threat. "Fuck you! You didn't know her, and you don't know me!" I fired the words at him with spite and walked away into the rain. "I know you better than you think. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to save the boy. His card is marked. You'll only cause more suffering." He screamed after me in a violent rage, all composure in his voice lost. I began to run through the mud and pelting rain to the front gates. It felt like an eternity before I reached them. I couldn't be certain he wasn't following me. I reached the trellised wall and climbed up it like I was 15 years younger. I vaulted over the top and made a sprint for my car. I opened the door and stuck the key in the ignition. The engine took a few seconds, but eventually roared to life. I turned on the headlights, put the car in first gear, and sprayed a hail of gravel behind me as I took off down the road. I didn't slow down till I got home. The adrenaline kept me going through the drive, but it was now wearing off. My heart and mind were racing, and I had a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. I took out my phone to look at the pictures of the graves I took. I swiped through the images of the graves, the names clearly etched in stone. But there was one more photo than there should have been. The final picture was of an ancient-looking gravestone with the name Simon Castles engraved on it, along with the following words: "All you need to do is do nothing." The multiple burning orbs rose high in the sky early this morning. Joining the action of the suns is a woman who lives alone in her quaint and cozy home. The season of summer has returned in full force. Humidity radiates within every crevice of her home to the point of feeling like a sauna. Upon waking, the woman is drenched in sweat and leaving a large pool in the shape of her once slumbering form. She fumbles to the kitchen to quench her highly dehydrated thirst, filling a crystal cup with ice and water. Yet within mere moments the ice has melted. This heat devours any form of cold or comfort, and she can no longer take it. The time has come to remove her air conditioning unit from the shed. As much as she loves her home, it has the downfall of not having central air, which leaves her with the annual task of carrying the heavy unit all the way up the stairs and struggling to fit it inside the living room window. After a sweaty endeavor leading to frustration with a hint of exhaustion, she has finally completed the task. Within an hour of tapping the power button, the room slowly begins to drop in temperature. As the days get hotter, the unit works even harder to fight off the enemy of extreme heat. Her living room remains the most comfortable of all the house. This is where she spends the majority of her time, just to alleviate the dreaded summertime. As she lounges on her couch reading to pass the time, she turns her head to feel the current of cool air flow towards her. Her eyes fixate on small black spots on the vents. Her brow furrows in curiosity and wonder at the sight. She walks towards the unit to investigate the odd specks. It appears to be some sort of mold forming from the moisture caused by the overworking of the unit. A few sprays of bleach and a vigorous wipe of a rag eliminates the problem. Even more days pass, bringing mass amounts of heat that bring forth more moisture into the vents. The spots have returned, but in mass numbers and increased size. There is even black liquid settling at the seal of the window. It slowly drips down the wall to soak into the carpet. So many times this woman has sprayed and cleaned, with every result being more mold forming. She runs her finger across the seal to examine the liquid on her fingertip. It smells of soil and rot, bringing on a case of nausea. She has opted to leave a towel on the carpet to catch the dripping black ichor that has to be changed daily. Her frustration rises to fits of rage and tears in confusion of why this is happening. The following morning, after her weekend routine, she discovers fungi growing through the vents and even surfacing from the water-soaked towel. With a scream, she races to grab the towel and toss it in the trash. The fungal spores scatter through the air in a cloud around the woman. Anger-induced scrubbing of a sponge brings the blackened infestation to its end within the vents. With no gloves to protect her hands, they are now caked in a gush of watery obsidian filth. She hastens to rid herself of the mess by tossing the sponge to the bottom of her trash can. Afterwards, her hands and arms are aggressively cleansed with scalding hot water mixed with liquid soap. The microscopic spores invade her nostrils, bringing the woman to a hazy slumber as she places herself on the couch. She is abruptly woken up to the searing pain throbbing within her hands. It's not the bones or muscles hurting from the constant cleaning, but from within her skin. as if something has invaded the very layers that make up the flesh on her hands. The sensation felt as if red-hot metallic wires wriggled inside of her dermis. It was unbearable for this woman, and caused a panic to invade her very core. Jumping up in an instant, she runs to her freezer to shove her burning hands into the cold, in hopes this can be her saving grace. For a few moments it seems to help her condition, but as she loses feeling in her fingertips, she can no longer handle it. Removing her hands from the freezer, she slowly regains feeling, and the burning begins to return. Looking down, she notices large bumps clustered at the tips of every finger on both hands. Her stomach wrenches in utter disgust to the point of nearly vomiting. She bursts into her bathroom to grab the bottle of isopropyl alcohol and begins to pour every drop into the clogged sink. This has to be the solution she is looking for. An infection of some sort has invaded her hands, so the alcohol should be what she needs to kill it. The soaking of her hands seems to do nothing for the burning, but she is convinced that it must. She unplugs the sink to allow the alcohol to drain. The fumes burn her eyes to the point of tears. The bumps are still present on her fingertips, and the burning has not stopped, but its intensity has died down. Slow steps towards the living room feel like an all-out cross-country marathon to her. As she plops herself down on the couch, her eyes move towards the unit to gaze at the black, pulsing mass of mushrooms. All at once, the light of consciousness falls in defeat to the darkness of sleep. A pounding headache is the catalyst to the unwelcomed awakening for the exhausted woman. Sharp, piercing jabs of pain lash out to her eyes while she rubs the sleep from them. She blinks rapidly to remove the fog, and her eyes drift to her hands absently. A gray mucus drips from jagged, bulging pores on the tops of her hands. Without any preservation, a putrid stream of vomit bursts out of the poor woman's mouth onto her chest. Tears roll from her eyes and the sting latches onto her cheeks from the acidic liquid. She jolts up towards the bathroom, but not before her eyes once again lock onto the window unit. Enormous fungi of the darkest palette writhe back and forth from the pulsating carpet to the warped walls of her home. She screams in terror and starts into a run to the bathroom door. She pulls the shower curtain to reveal the knobs above the tub faucet and turns on the hot water. Ripping off every bit of clothing, she looks towards the mirror and shrieks in horror. The reflection looking back at her is one of pure terror and awful things that warp the mind into the realms of insanity. The hair on her head is matted and infused with thick green pulsing veins of somethings not natural to the human body. Bulbous black mushroom caps have begun to emerge from the surface of her skin in multiple areas. Long roots of orange have busted through her scalp and wrapped around the green veins. More jagged pores have spewed out a foul-smelling gray sludge, leaving a pool beneath her feet. The sharp pain in her head intensifies as she gazes at the mirror more closely. Grotesque, inky mold has invaded her tear ducts and traveled to the very iris of each eye, with a shifting mass of yellow fibers tickling her eyelashes. Another scream echoes from her mouth, and within is a sight of more green veins that have pierced into her tongue, accompanied by orange roots that intertwine in and around small black stalks that connect to bulbous caps. Ash-colored splotches have surrounded her gums, and the enamel of her teeth has withered to slender points of yellow. The terror spirals out of control in her mind. The panic grasps her heart and squeezes without mercy. Her infected eyes roll to the back of her head. The pain permeates in her skull, and she collapses. As her body falls to the floor, her skull slams into the edge of the porcelain tub. The fungus has made the bone in her cranium paper thin, and it bursts with no restraint. What should be brains are nothing but fungal embryonic sacs filled with dark fluid. They fly through the air to slam and burst on the walls to release gel and mucus that spit more spores. No blood is present within the woman's limp body, only the gray mucus which rolls out of her skull and every other opening to seep into the wooden planks of the floor. The mushrooms in her skin shift more violently until they remove themselves from her flesh, leaving gaping sores that ooze disgusting fluids. Long tendrils grow from the stems to encompass every inch of the bathroom, and her body disintegrates into something resembling soil. The growth of this infestation continues with no boundaries to engulf all of her once quaint and cozy home. She is but fertilizer for them now, solely for the purpose to increase the growth and feed this living, rotten mass of filth. This is their home now, and soon the entirety of the home will be covered with the growth. The roots dig deep, burying beyond the foundation and traveling in the dirt. A highway of connected lines that join all of the ever-growing fungi, the size of the house will soon be too small, and over time the mass will travel in order to compensate for the expansion. The neighboring houses will be next, invaded through any crevice open for the inky forms to invade and breed.
And that's a wrap for today's chilling tale here on Haunting Stories. We hope you enjoyed immersing yourself in the world of the supernatural as much as we did bringing it to you. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to our channel and giving this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more scary content. Until next time, remember to keep your lights on and your doors locked. And as always, stay spooky. Goodbye.